this week, your assignment was to, excellent. For this week, you're assigned to try to get through some of the book. Did everybody get a book mailed? Did you guys get the book? Thumbs up if you received your book. Awesome. Remington, you're still
I
waiting?
haven't gotten mine yet.
Okay. So who has not gotten yours yet? Wyatt, you want to take this note? Wyatt didn't get a book. Remington, you didn't yet?
I saw that it said, I got an email or something saying that it was purchased and sent out, but I'm in Pennsylvania, so it might take a little bit of time to get to me.
Okay. I think there's a way you can get it online, link or not.
Probably.
So Thomas, if you're listening, definitely make sure that Remington.
Everybody got a link with the content online.
Hey, maybe you could put it into the chat. That'd be great as well, Tom.
All right.
Awesome. So we'll put that into the chat. And then you also were assigned an opportunity to go for yourself and look at the city budget with those links that I gave you all. And so in this process, we're going to help. We're going to ask questions. We're going to give you a chance to share out what you're able to find. It's very interesting. I know it's very heady, but I even was sitting there for an hour or two looking through that stuff, and I was amazed at how much there to digest. Cool. Let's begin. So next slide.
Just a second.
Oh, we're waiting for Tom to upload the link. That's
Okay.
awesome.
All right.
Let's do this. All right. So what we're going to do is, you know who we are. Oh, yes, Celia, you had your hand up? I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't see you had your, what do you call it? The reaction hand up, so I didn't know. All right. And you can always just, raise your hand and talk too. You don't have to, if you want to, besides the emojis. Excellent. So you know who we are. We're the Civic Lab. I would encourage all of you to check out our Power Institute link. I gave you an actual link to our executive summary and emails beforehand, in the second email in terms of the first week email. So by all means, read over our executive summary, what we're offering folks through the Power Institute. And then, of course, check us out at the Civic Lab. And here we are doing a thing. And we're here to really help people do better in terms of their civic love and their capacities to fight for justice across the country. Side note for Tom Fagan, if he's there, I forgot to mention this, but that the rowing crew that you saw, that movie, what's it called? What's the movie called? Someone jump in. That documentary you saw on the rowing club. A most beautiful thing, right? So my job was actually, we were fiscal sponsor for that rowing club at Manly High School at my old job. And so I actually know the author of the book. He's a friend of mine. He's in New York now. And maybe I'll give him a call and see if he can come talk to you all about it. But my old agency was the fiscal agent, and I was actually helping to manage that program from Manly High School, the rowing program. So it's actually close to home for me as well. Cool to see him do a book and also a movie about it. Okay, tomorrow we have the Hyde Park Historical Society event. Timuel Black is was he 100 or 98, something like that? He's in his late 90s or early hundreds. He is literally a walking legacy, a walking dictionary library on movement building in Chicago and in general in the country. And he is going to be doing something tomorrow morning, Sunday, February 21st, 3 p.m. Central Time, via Zoom video conference. He's going to talk about the 63 boycott. Conversation with Professor Timuel D. Black, HPHS Emeritus Board Member. I highly recommend it. I've been in his presentations before on this one too. And so hearing it from somebody who was there and hearing his perspective, it's an incredible spiritual moment, to be honest. Fortunately, I've worked with him. I have pictures of him with my sons during the Tree Camp, the Tree Garcia campaign. I got this great picture of him with Wesley and Jonathan, right? The new and the old in this one shot. It's pretty cool. But he's a great guy. I've known him for a long time. I honor him. So I recommend taking his lecture and putting that as part of your bucket list in terms of social justice work. And then also, of course, understanding more historical context in terms of Chicago. The '63 boycott was huge in Chicago and across the country as well. Cool. Next slide.
Well, we're inviting everyone to join a celebration this coming Friday night, where Jonathan is going to be honored by Chicago African Americans in Philanthropy as the 2021 Champion of Social Justice. Congratulations, Jonathan. It's a huge,
Thank you, sir.
huge honor and well-deserved. And we put the link into chat right here.
And Nicole Hannah-Jones is the Pulitzer Prize winning reporter and creator of the landmark 1619 Project.
So she will be speaking.
How cool is that? To be
There's
part
a
of a
fee.
conference with another incredible warrior.
There's a fee for it, but we just thought you should know about it if you choose to join us. It'll be-
Absolutely. Cool. So today, we're going to be talking about budget and finances. Yay, it's so exciting, right? It's the one thing that we'd love to talk about, right? In our personal lives, in our family lives. Trust me, budget and finances is such a thing to talk about. And the question is, how do you think about a budget, particularly a civic budget? Think about your own family's budgeting, making plans for the future. What we're going to do is we're going to be looking at the city's budget, but in many respects, it's going to be reflected in how we look at our own personal budgets. Hold on one second. Off the first floor, please. Let's go. I'm literally in the Zoom. Thank you. Sorry about that. We'll edit that from the recording. Okay, and so we're going to talk about the budget as a means of setting priorities, much like you do in your own family budget or personal budget. Individually, each of you choose the priorities on how to spend the revenue that you have. Right? You choose between dinner, food, all those type of expenses, social expenses, bills, supporting people, donations, whatever it is. It's a means of setting priorities for yourself, and at the same time, it's a means for setting priorities for the city. And it's a roadmap. A budget we look at as a roadmap to the future, and we also, for us, the reality is it's not just a roadmap for the future, but it's what we're doing now. Right? It's about will and priorities. What we spend on speaks volumes to our values and to what we believe in as individuals and as people, right? And so the idea is that, and at the broader collective level, it becomes a scorecard to show who's winning and who's ahead, right? And we're going to be looking at the budget and finances of the city of Chicago, and we're going to see who's winning and who's ahead. The reality is, it gets a little bit more different when it comes to looking at a municipal budget, right? A little bit bigger, it's more tax revenue, but the reality is it's still the same thing at the baseline. We believe, and if you ever take any type of training going forward, what they teach you is that number one, your budget is your moral document, right? And so it really reflects your values, what you prioritize, what you believe is the first thing to take care of in terms of your resources, right? And oftentimes we see a lot among the people we serve as, particularly participants or people that we're serving, is they have to choose between a rock and a hard place, right? Do I feed my children for the week or pay the heat bill, or do I buy diapers for my 2-year-old, right? And so we're often seeing people making horrible, tough choices in terms of the budget. But ultimately, we believe the budget is a moral document. And at the city level, at the county level, at larger pots, the difference is, a city, they collect taxes. The government collects taxes from its citizen, and it generates revenue. And from that revenue, we then develop what we call a city municipal budget for the city of Chicago. And that's sort of the huge difference in terms of the budget. So check this link out. Maybe if you want to put it into the chat, Tom. This is for fiscal year 2020. The city budget was at $11.65 billion, with a B. That's larger than some countries. If you think about it, if you ever want to check out the world and see how people are living, our city budget, our municipal budget, just the city, nothing else, is 11.6. It's almost $12 billion. And you can check that link out, copy it, put it into the chat, and do your own research. It's it's a pretty huge budget, and we are the third largest federal city in the country still. You, Tom.
So this handy graphic shows where the money comes from and where it goes to. Again, this is the what we call the corporate budget for the city of Chicago, which we'll show you in a minute is just part of a much larger puzzle. But when people usually think of the city's budget, this is what they're really referring to. And for 2020, it was about a little south of $12 billion. And you can see the different funds that make up the sources of the revenue and where it goes to. And look down in the blue, financing, that is to say debt service, is huge. And I know this is not a class on public financing or banking, but this is really a very critical piece of social justice work and policy work about carrying debt. That is a decision that cities and other units of government make that have enormous consequences for the operation of the city or the county in terms of how much cash is available to do the stuff that we want to see a city do. And so if we're spending so much money on servicing debt, what are we really doing? We're really passing money from you, the taxpayers and other people of the city, to banks, right? So this is sort of the dirty little secret of most public financing, the enormous amount of debt that America is carrying. And can we figure out a way to get out of that debt? Is there another way to operate? And we're not going to really get into that except a little peripherally when we talk about the book, Chicago's Not Broke, but it is something I really want to leave with you because you may go off into your practices and never encounter the word civic debt again, but it will always be a millstone around your collective necks. All right. So when we talk about the city of Chicago, this is what we're looking at. We covered on this briefly in our first presentation. The city has some 2 million plus residents. The voters choose the mayor, the city clerk, and the treasurer. This is from the whole city. And then each of the 50 wards chooses the member of the city council. And so the departments that report to the mayor, you see, are in the light blue. And this is where you think of, the streets and sands, the airport, et cetera, sort of the guts of the city. But there's also quite a lot of administrative things in here. And the other thing that I should have pointed out in the earlier slide, which I'll go back to, take a look at that purple flow. That's public safety. That's the other thing we should make a huge note about. How much money are we spending in the city of Chicago for policing? This is a huge issue across America. And right here in the city, you may have heard of the term defund the police. We can have a conversation about that during this class. But that's how much money is going to operate our policing. And you can ask yourself, are we getting a good value for that spend? Is that a good use of our money? And it's the same for many other cities. So if you look at a budget for Baltimore or Detroit or San Bernardino, whatever it is, you're going to see the same thing where the policing takes up a huge chunk of that civic budget. Okay, so we'll just put a bookmark on that because we're going to talk about that later. So again, here's a shorthand of the money that's being spent for 2020. You can see, again, public safety is by and large the biggest piece of this chunk. So if you look at community services, it's like not even half what we're spending on the police. So there's a huge discussion in the social justice world about is there another way to deal with calls, when someone is mentally ill, having an upset incident, is someone is flipped out on drugs, is acting out. That person may appear to be dangerous, but they could be just sort of erratic and scary. And the only option we have right now is for police to come to that call. So Lucas, he doesn't take the right medication for his allergies. He has a bad allergic reaction. He starts acting erratically, and his roommate freaks out and calls 911. Lucas is not necessarily a danger, but he looks scary. And so we've seen too many instances where the police who are not trained respond with what they know. They have guns, tasers, and batons, and they see, our friend Lucas is down. Whereas if there had been, if someone had come to the call who was a trained social worker or an EMT or someone with those skills, they might have been able to deal with Lucas's situation in a more appropriate manner. And in fact, in cities that are doing these programs where police are not intervening, the arrests for those calls go to zero. So again, the budget is directly tied to these social justice issues and issues of programming and how do we care? How do we care for each other in the community? It comes right to the heart of this. And so there's a public policy struggle right now in the city of Chicago for funding a pilot project. And naturally, social justice people want more money to be liberated for these interventions without the police, but Mayor Lightfoot is not going along with it. So we've got a public policy struggle right now, which if you guys are interested, we can cover later on. But I just thought, since a lot of you are practitioners and are interested in social services and taking care of your community members, this is very relevant. Now, the budget process goes on every year. So where we are right now in the earlier part of the year, the department heads are sort of looking at their wishes for next year, and all during the spring, they will be sending information up to the mayor about their wishes for next year. The mayor and her people are planning as well. How should we go in face of COVID? All those realities are being discussed now. And in July, the departments submit their budgets to the mayor, and we have this process. And in usually around September-ish, the mayor will have several forums. Now, hopefully we'll be out of COVID. And I encourage you all, we will not be together in September, but I encourage you to attend a public budget hearing, which usually are different parts of the city, and check out the mayor's website, and do go to them and see how they roll and see what you think of them, as citizens step up and usually have a chance to talk right to the mayor who's physically there. What do they think about where the city is going and how they want their money to be spent? So that's something I've been doing for years and years. It's quite a bit of show business and public policy.
So, okay, so just to also reiterate, thank you, Tom. In a past life, when I was a trainer of young people, we used to train up hundreds of young people in the ages of 12 and 18 from inside the neighborhoods of Chicago to actually understand the budget itself, and then to conduct direct actions on the budget hearings under Mayor Daley. And so we had a budget and finance campaign called Youth First, where our young people were actually proposing to the city how to increase revenue to fund young people and families across the city of Chicago. So we do a lot of this in terms of building the capacity of Chicagoans to understand the budget and finances. And so this is a moment where we want to first poll, see who's done their work assignment around budgets. But also, just one more side note before I go into that, Tom, and maybe Tom will look for it, but if you want to have a side discussion about police accountability, we would love to do that. If you want to do that, we can add that to our workload. It's a huge issue. We work closely with the groups that are demanding more police accountability. I actually sat on Mayor Emanuel's police accountability task force. and was invited as a member of his working group around community police relations. There are 5 working groups, and there's an actual website, www.patf.org. I'll look for it and put in the link. If you want to learn more about the recommendations that came out of the task force. That task force was established out of the shooting of Laquan McDonald, and then the cover up by the mayor, and then the work done by Jamie Calvin, and we also participated a small part of that. We talked about that, but ultimately we know what the issues are around that. We know the pros and cons. I'm very familiar from the inside out as being part of the task force. We were given all access to how the system works from the inside. I met with the top chiefs, Chicago Police, Dallas, and other places. So we're very familiar as an agency to that discussion, if you want to have that as well. Now, what reflections from your investigation at the city budget? How easy was it to find information, to access it, to digest it? And then what do you think, how can we use it? How can we actually take the information that we're looking at through these budget links and use it in terms of the work that we do? First of all, did everybody get a chance to go to the budget links? Thumbs up or hands if you did. Emily, did you? Thomas, Megan, did you? I don't know if Tom's on there. I can't see him.
Could you repeat that? It kind of cut out for a second.
Did everybody get a chance to go to those budget links for their work assignment, to study the budget and choose an area that they're passionate about? It could be education, it could be, there's many areas if you look at how the budget was set up in terms of the departments. Okay, cool. So who wants to dive in? Here are some prompt questions in front of you. Who wants to jump in and share their experience in investigating Chicago's city budget?
So I kind of picked education to focus on because I was really interested to see how much money is being allocated towards education. And I was unpleasantly surprised. I thought that more would be going towards our education, which I find personally very important. And I think I'm trying to remember the exact number. It was $1 million something, but it just kind of disgusted me almost.
Why did it disgust you almost?
Because I feel that everyone has a right to a fair and adequate education, and so many kiddos are not receiving that in Chicago.
And when you looked at it, you're telling me the budget for education was very small? Wasn't that much?
I looked at it was one of the links that was in the folder, and I could be wrong. Maybe I was on a wrong page or something, but it seemed small to me, but maybe I was looking at the wrong thing.
No, it's whatever you saw is what you saw. Thank you for sharing. And so maybe throughout this, we can keep your focus on education as we begin to unearth other budgets, particularly CPS and all this other stuff. Keep that focus. Cool. Anybody else? So we got Celia focusing on education, which is it's a good focus. Anybody else who looked at the budget? Any observations, reactions, reflections?
I'm always interested in public safety. I would expect it's the same as Chicago as it is in almost any big city throughout the country, and even smaller cities. I would say since I don't know, just thinking back to the 60s, I was born in '83, but when President Nixon was in office in the late 60s and 70s, I think he had the campaign of the war on drugs. And I think municipalities throughout the country sort of followed suit. Politicians want to be viewed as somebody who is tough on crime. So how do you be tough on crime? You allocate scarce resources to police and public safety. You criminalize more behavior. You build more prisons, and come up with legislation that's going to, lock people up, basically. And I think that 50 and 60 year pendulum swing is starting to slow down now and even stop. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement is part of the force to maybe draw some of that down. Maybe we won't see law enforcement so militarized. when people talk about defunding the police, maybe we can take some resources from them and put it towards education, like Cece was saying, because police cannot solve all of society's ills. And other people I've heard in the defund the police argument, when they say defund the police, they're saying, maybe not take away resources, but reallocate it towards more training for police officers, more training on mental health and other, sort of resources that they, can use that are at their disposal rather than just putting handcuffs on everybody.
Mhm. Yeah, it's great to hear that. Absolutely. The big picture is that this is always going back and forth. And so part of this is how do we define safety, right? And we continue to define it in terms of punishment and crime versus maybe poverty, maybe, jobs, maybe if our neighbor, there's other ways to look at how we are safe. How do we create safe and secure environments and throughout the city in terms of neighborhoods? Particularly in places where we see the lack of opportunity. So excellent. And I would love to share with you all my experiences. I was part of the Generation Y group that was the first generation of youth organizers to counteract the super predator camp in the 80s and 90s, in the mid 90s. So it's great stuff.
Yeah,
Awesome.
people can throw into chat what you mean by safety.
Absolutely. We want to create a robust discussion. One of the things that I'm really appreciative about the Civic Lab is that we take into consideration all things. We look at all angles, and I'm going to put in chat. I will share with you some internal documents from the Police Accountability Task Force, and I'll put them into your readings. I developed a 21st century law enforcement strategy would look like. That was part of my task as the chair of the subgroup on community policing in the city of Chicago. Of course, my presentation wasn't adopted. Parts of it were, actually, some of it was, but the whole package wasn't. But you have to compromise sometimes. Cool. So Remington, maybe throughout this effort, continuing to look at this area of public safety and law enforcement would be another sort of core bucket of just continuing to expand our knowledge around. Excellent. Anybody else? Lucas, did you get a chance? Emily, you guys get a chance to look at the budget stuff? Okay.
I think,
Go
can I
ahead.
say something?
Yeah.
One thing that kind of stood out to me is that, like, the budget is, first of all, it's a lot larger than I expected. And I'm not a finance person or a money person. I haven't taken a math class in 4 years or so. So it might just be my own bias, but it's kind of hard for me to understand like where all this money is actually going, because it'll tell you where it goes, but it doesn't tell you what specifically it's actually going to. Like maybe if you really get into it for a specific part, it'll be easier to understand. But I just feel like there's so much money that's going in, and it's going into so many different categories that there's got to be so much going under the surface that's going right into people's pockets. Like a lot of this like investment stuff is just kind of like confusing to me why the city is doing all of that when they should just be having all this revenue. Like it's almost like they're treating it like more like a business than like a non-for-profit, like for the people organization. It's then like, in my opinion, when it should be more so that way. But it just seems really shady to me. But
Well,
maybe
Wyatt,
that's
hold on to that
Wyatt.
thought. You
Yeah,
have
hold on to it.
actually previewed a major theme of our work, which I am not going to tip, but let's just say we shall return to that very shrewd remark
Mhm.
in about 45 minutes. Right
Agreed.
on.
It's definitely the reason
Why
why I
you have
picked
good
this.
instinct. One thing that you learn as an organizer is trust your instincts, right? We call it the smell test, the hear test, the gut test. Your gut's telling you something's awry here. Come on, wait a second. How could this be? What's
Yeah.
going on here? And so absolutely keep close to those gut instincts. And you're on the right track in terms of the city budget and finances. It is mammoth, believe it. Yes, it's really hard to get through. And that's part of the challenge, right? Cool. Anybody else want last minute comments about their experience in the budget? Anything else? Okay, remember, if you haven't done it yet, go into the city budget, go through it, spend an hour or two to look at it, find the place that you're passionate about, Celia education, Remington law enforcement, public safety. Find that passion, and then next week we'll check in as well to see where you're all at. Everybody should find an area that we can focus on, and also just get a feel and understanding of how to look at the budget, particularly after this workshop. And there is more. Yes, there is. There's always more in the city of Chicago. So right here, you've got, these are the badges of different department agencies, in addition to just the city of Chicago, which we now know to the top left is it's almost south of 12 billion. Maybe it's more than that now. I think it's over 12 billion now with the new 21 budget, I believe. But it's 12 billion. I believe when I was looking at it, but it's close to 12 billion. All these other areas have their own budget, their own standing budget, and their own governance structure, right? Public schools, park districts, transportation, city colleges, Chicago Housing Authority. So if you were to take the total revenue from all of the Chicago government, right? Because remember, all these budgets impact how we live every day on the daily. Our children, our families, our neighborhoods. We take all the total revenue and add it together. We now know that it's north of 24 million, a billion. Sorry, did I say million? 24 billion with a B, right? And so that's really what we're dealing with in terms of the budget and finances of the city of Chicago. Each of these agencies is operating and supports the civics of our life here in Chicago, from city colleges, tax increment financing collected in 2018, public schools, housing, transit, parks, and so forth. And those are the different budgets as of 2020. So we are now dealing with something that it's not just 12 billion, it's now closer to $24 billion of revenue now, Wyatt, is being allocated to the quality of life of this city. Guys, it's even bigger than the 12 billion. Cool. So that's the grand total of all units of local government. And this is the reason why, and Tom's incredible, creative, imaginative, you know, he's an artist by trade, guys. He's like an actor, to be honest. He was reimagining this whole narrative in his head. He's thinking, man, I can't, you know, from Olympic Games to this, how can we keep saying, I mean, we have billions of dollars. How do we keep hearing from the politicians and the administrators and the commissioners that we're just constantly broke? There's no money, there's no resources in the government. And so, you know, we can't service people. We can't hire young people. We can only provide young people 15,000 jobs when there's, you know, over 150,000 young people that need jobs, so forth and so forth. So he came up with this idea of Chicago is not broke. And so he brought together a whole collective group of artists, did I say artists? Writers, authors, each of them, he'll go through them all. And he broke up the book. He'll explain some of that to you. And the whole point was to bust the Chicago machines narrative that were broke. Now remember, in your last workshop, we're scaffolding this. We studied what the Chicago machine looks like, right? Its legacy and its current formation, right? All the way into state government, right? And so imagine the machine busting that narrative, moving from scarcity, we're broke, we don't have the resources to address our most challenging issues, violence, education, jobs, education, all that stuff, to one of abundance and priority and willpower. And that's sort of where we are at.
So the question before us, you know, with this book and a lot of our work is pretty fundamental. If Chicago is broke, if America is broke, that's a dismal future. That's a future I don't really want to be part of. There's really not too many ways to go forward in a future where Chicago is broke and America is broke. It means that everything that you see around you is stuck in amber and frozen and cannot change. So good news is, if you're comfortable and affluent and have what you need, then you will continue to have it. Bad news is, if you're on the edge of prosperity and you're not sure of your future, you may lose it. And if you're already stuck in a situation that is not very good, you're never going to get out of it. So the question is, not just a philosophical, like, oh, it'd be great to sort of like have an academic debate. It's essential, really, to the future of our lives, you know, in this place, Chicago, but also in the country we called America. So what we did is gather together a group of authors, all who are very well known in their own spaces, and ask them to do a little tiny article, you know, trying to represent their years or sometimes decades of work, but make it very simple for an average person who could read this like on the subway or waiting for your laundry to dry. And also to put a number with their idea. So that was the challenge that I gave out to the authors. So it turns out that the way to talk about this, which we found very useful, is by talking about 3 large buckets of money. The first bucket we call money that's stolen from us, which is to say money we should not have spent nor continue to spend. And you might say this is sort of like good government 101. Like, let's not do these things, right? Because they don't make any sense and they waste a lot of money. And so there are 3 pieces to that. The first is the cost of corruption. We've already said that Chicago is the most corrupt city in the world, and that comes from the work of these guys. Dick Simpson used to be an alderman, an independent alderman in the 70s, and Tom is an investigative journalist, and together they work over the years and have tracked, like good reporters and good scholars, all the cases where some public person, a judge, a county official, an alderman, or a governor has been arrested and sent to the pokey. And sadly, it's work that is never going to stop. And so you can see these are current stories. Alderman Carrie Austin is under investigation for abuse of loan monies that she got to buy a house cheap. Her chief of staff is implicated in another land scandal. Danny Solis, who is a very powerful Latino alderman, wore a wire for the FBI for 2 years. And we still don't know how deep and how many people are going to fall like a bowling ball into the bowling alley, you know, pins falling every which way. But the biggest fish is this guy, Alderman Ed Burke. He becomes the 37th alderman, sitting alderman, to be indicted since 1973. And so that's the first bucket that we talk about, the cost of corruption.
And I know him personally. He was my alderman for years, so we had to work together on local projects.
The second thing we talk about is the cost of bad bank deals. Again, it sounds like, why are we talking about finance in a class on social justice and social services? But again, back to the point of where this money is going means it's not going somewhere else. And Jackson Potter was the chief of staff of the Chicago Teachers Union, and he wrote this chapter about bad bank deals. And the one that he focuses on are called toxic swaps, which was undertaken by this man right here, David Vitale. In private life, he's a financier, and I know David. We were in Leadership Greater Chicago together. He's considered, you know, quite the genius, and is very enormously wealthy and successful from his private financial deals. However, when he was hired to be the president of the Board of Education, he apparently lost his mind and put us into these deals with Wall Street that all went the wrong way, costing the public schools hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, over $1 billion. So these are fees that we were stuck paying Wall Street because David placed the wrong chip on the casino board. The third and saddest part of this particular chapter is the cost of police abuse and violence, which has been in the headlines constantly basically since as long as I've been in the city, and I've only been here since 1980, but it goes way before that. Jamie is a genius investigator with the Invisible Institute, and he wrote this chapter for us. And so we're talking about the cost to people's lives, and a shattered life and a lost life that you can't put a cost on that. it traumatizes families and whole communities. It makes communities reluctant to interface with the law enforcement. But there is a number you can put on the settlements. And so far, the city of Chicago is probably north of $1 billion. Let me say that again. Chicago has spent $1 billion on settlements and lawsuits. So we'd have to defend these policemen when they're brought up on a bad shooting or corruption. We defend them. And oftentimes the law department, which is our city lawyers, are holding files away from the judge and the public. And we've had judges reprimand the city of Chicago many times because we protect these police through all kinds of bureaucratic restraints. But you could ask yourself, why can't we stop this? Why are police still behaving in this way? That's a great question. And if we want to get into the work that Jonathan was talking about, the alternatives to policing, the history of police in Chicago, we can certainly do a session on that. There's a huge amount of work going on here. But just for our purposes, we call out the huge waste of funds, over $1 billion, and we're not stopping yet. The second bucket that we speak about in the book is money that's hidden from us. So we know they're collecting it, we just can't find it. And this is where my mania with TIFs come in. And I wrote the chapter called TIF, Billions Off the Books. And we're going to get into painstaking detail next week. You'll be experts. But basically, these tax increment financing districts have sprouted like mushrooms since Mayor Daley took office back in the late 80s. And to this point, they're taking about $750 million of property taxes off the table every year, going into sort of slush funds or piggy banks that are not part of the regular budget. And we'll talk about this in detail next week. But let's just say for now, if TIFs weren't around, then we would have had in 2018 $675 million more in property taxes to be distributed to the units of government that use them. So since TIFs are here, that's money that is not available to us to do the public good. And as a preview of what we're going to speak about next week, let's just tell you that the number one user of property taxes are your public schools. So the public school is supposed to get about 56 cents of every dollar that's collected in the city of Chicago from property taxes. So you can see there is a victim here when property taxes go missing. And we will spend a lot of time on this next week to make sure everybody's comfy with this concept. But anyway, for now, we say that is money that's gone missing. We know it's out there, we can't get it. The third bucket is money we are not collecting, but we should be. So that's like say you're at a poker game, and I happen to like poker, but I'm a very bad player. But let's say you're at a poker game and you get dealt 4 aces. Oh boy, aren't you in good shape? But then you make a bad judgment and you fold because someone bluffs you and you leave your 4 aces. That's like leaving money on the table. Darn, later on you said, I wish I had not left that money on the table. But that's what we're doing here. And we're talking about this in 3 law programs. So what we're saying here is these are things we're not doing, but we could be, and they're so easy to do. They're being done somewhere in America right now. So why can't we do these things and collect this money that we're not collecting? So it's sort of like a wasted opportunity. And every year that goes by, it's money that we should have collected, but we didn't. So what are we talking about? The first is the progressive income tax for Illinois. So again, we hit this pretty heavily because Illinois is one of the worst states in America for its collecting income taxes. We need a progressive income tax to collect the revenue from the state. We're the 5th wealthiest state. But when you have a regressive tax, that means you're not collecting the money you need to operate your state, which includes, of course, all the things that you guys care about. mental health facilities, prisons, roads, schools, mental health centers, drug rehabilitation centers, all the things that a state should be doing and attending to. If there's not enough money in the bank, these things won't get done. So Illinois is one of the worst states in terms of how much money it gives to local school districts on a per pupil basis. And again, we're one of the wealthiest states, so we should be bragging about how much the state sends to each school district to educate our children, but it's not the case. So there's a real impact on y'all's work in your future, what your community looks like, because we do not have one. We do not have a progressive income tax. So we tried. This was on the ballot, not even a few months ago, to change the Constitution. It needed a 60% affirmative vote. It got only 45%. And I would say that that is something that's deeply disturbing. And I hope that in your other classes and in your other spaces where you engage with professionals in the nonprofit sector, that you ask why this happened. Where were we? Where was Adler University? Where was the Illinois Association of Social Workers? Where was the United Way? Why wasn't this an all hands on deck effort to pass this? And if it's not obvious on why you guys should be, then we need to have a real serious conversation about that. Why that's a very appropriate discussion for the social justice, social service, nonprofit community. In
Tom,
any case,
who's Hillary Denk? Who's Hillary Denk?
Hillary Denk is, well, right now she's a director of community services for Congressman John Porter. But at the time she wrote the chapter, she was on the state board of the League of Women Voters of Illinois. So the League of Women Voters, which is a very radical organization, joke, have been working on this particular issue for about 30 years. So she wrote that chapter, and it's a beautiful primer on understanding the issue. All right, now the biggest single idea in the book is something called a financial transaction tax, often referred to as a Robin Hood tax. That is to say, Robin Hood robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. To set up the discussion of what exactly that is, I'll show you this number. Does anybody know what this number is? Shout it out if you know what it is.
1,000 with a lot of zeros.
18 zeros.
Wow.
What is this number?
Cost of feeding my kids.
Anybody know?
I don't know. Come on.
Is it a bazillion?
More than a trillion, right?
Nope, it's much more than that. A 1 with 18 zeros is a quintillion. Quintillion. I'll put that in the chat. A quintillion. That is how much money runs through the Chicago Board of Trade every year in terms of the trades, the volume of purchases. That is to say, people placing orders on the Board of Trade for futures and other kinds of security products, and they pay no tax on it. So if somebody was to leave this chat right now and run to the 7-Eleven and buy a bottle of water, you got to pay a tax on it. Anybody buy a book on Amazon or a set of dishes, you pay a tax, right? You go to the Jewel, you buy your groceries. Jewel isn't keeping the tax. They're collecting the tax from you and sending it to the state. So Jewel and every other store you've ever visited has to report. The Civic Lab pays sales tax. I sent you all copies of the book, but they're $15 each. If you had bought a copy, that's $1.50 sales tax. That's sales tax that we owe the state of Illinois so it can run its business. But how come these guys can run up a quintillion dollars worth of business and there's no tax on it? Well, what the professors propose is a modest tax that would raise billions of dollars, and that's described in the book. That's the biggest number in the book. All right, now, final idea is my personal favorite. It's the one that most people have never heard of before, and that is a public bank. And the author there is Amara Enya. Dr. Enya was a candidate for mayor in 2019, and she's generally seen as an expert on policy and economic development, and is often seen on local television commenting on public affairs and elections. And I asked her to write this chapter, and she lays out pretty clearly what the heck is a public bank. And think of it as a public utility where its job, it's not to fleece you and rip you off, but to facilitate economic progress. And the idea is embodied by the oldest public bank in the world. It's called the Bank of North Dakota. It was created in that prairie state over 100 years ago. And if you go to the Bank of North Dakota's website and Google around there, you'll see this amazing thing has made life very, very good for people in North Dakota. Cheap loans, essentially, is really what we're talking about. For kids to go to school, for people to build their businesses, for people to buy their first homes. And you'll see in the book, the example that we ran, now again, it's a few years old, but essentially the concept is still valid. If you are a student in North Dakota going to an in-state school there, and your loan was backed up by the Bank of North Dakota, you paid a certain amount of money. If you're a student in Illinois going to a state school here using the Bank of America, you're going to get a loan that would be about 25% more expensive than your colleague in North Dakota. So think of it this way. Two students going into undergrad at the same time, one in North Dakota and one in Illinois. They spend their 4 years matriculating. They graduate. Each has a payment book of money they owe the respective banks. The guy in North Dakota will be finished a few years before you, and he'll have about $5,000 more because of it that he could put into his home, a business, buy a car, or whatever you choose to do with it. And of course, that money would be circulating in North Dakota. So you can see that having a public bank is really a very big deal. And the state of North Dakota is one of the most financially sound states in the union, and this is because of it. So anyway, those are the three parts of that last chapter. We put it all together, and we come up with the scorecard. This is like a riff off the scoreboard in Wrigley Field. It's about $5.5 billion a year we're talking about. So let me rephrase that. If all the ideas in our book had been adopted when we put the book out 5 years ago, Chicago would have had $25 billion more to play with than it does. And every year that it goes by, we're saying that's another 5 billion or more or less that is lost. So we say to our policyholders, let's have the debate. Why can't we have these things? And we've been invited to community meetings about 170 times to present this book. So now we've done it to you. Now, before we move on to reflection, I wanted to add one thing to our conversation, and then Jonathan will pick it up with reflection. But I wanted to add to our conversation the question of what's up with Texas. So you may know that bad weather has hit that state and all the South really very hot, very heavily in the last few weeks. But we're reading a lot about Texas, and we see two things that came to my mind that I thought would be relevant for our conversation going forward. The first is the front page of the New York Times that shows a family burning their own furniture for warmth. They're burning their own furniture because there's no heat, there's no water, there's no power. The second is the news from the mayor of a small town in Texas called Colorado City, in which he angrily posted online that he says the city and the county owes you nothing. he's talking to his residents. He's saying, don't become dependent on handouts. Get off your ass and take care of your own family. So let's keep that in mind. Let's move on to reflection, Jonathan.
All right. So on that note, get off our ass. Thank you, Tom. We will do that. Thank you, Mayor of Colorado City in Texas, which I guess he's no longer the mayor, right?
He resigned.
I'm surprised he's not like out of town by the. Anyways, okay. So that really is a great exclamation point and sort of bringing this book into the real case scenarios that we're seeing across the country. We're seeing people across the country, municipalities struggling, in the middle of multi-pandemics, snowstorms, fire, you name it, the extremes in terms of our global climate. And so we want to give you an opportunity just to digest and reflect a little bit about what you just took in, and maybe even if some of you started reading the book, that's great. So what do you make of the overall content? Why you talked about, you really hinted this in terms of what is the city for? Why don't we see cities that are actually not corrupt, and are there examples of that in places that are actually vibrant and thriving? And then what would a city fully funded for all look like? And really why you really jumped us into this moment with your comments. I appreciate that. So just think about that. Let's just ponder and sit here for a second and kind of riff and let's exchange in the dialogue. So what do you think? So reactions to the overall content.
I kind of have a question.
Sure.
So for that $24 billion number, is that what you guys are saying is the revenue each year for Chicago?
You mean the total, all the agencies? That slide deck? Can you go back to that, Tom? Yeah, let's go back to that. You can slide back. It's perfect.
I guess I'm just
So what
having
we're
a-
saying is that the city of each of those banners is a separate agency, right? It has its own governing structure. It has its own budget. Go to the one before, Tom, please. Right?
Oh, I see.
Right. So if you go to the one before, Tom, show all the banners first. There. So City of Chicago, that's the City of Chicago emblem up at the top, right? And that under that emblem, we know what the budget is. We just showed you the budget. It's FY 2020 was just shy of 12 billion. FY 21 is probably going to be more, but we know that budget. Then the city, then the Chicago Public School has its own board and its own agency, its own structure, governance structure, and its own budget, separate of the City of Chicago. Same thing for Housing Authority is a $1.1 billion budget, and that's separate from the 12 billion that we looked at the City of Chicago. Same thing, the Park District has about a $500 million budget. It fluctuates between 480 and 500, depending where it is. And that's a separate agency of the City of Chicago. And it goes on and on. We talked about tips. Now, what I forgot to mention, I put into the chat and Tom highlighted, is that the Chicago mayor, whether it's Mayor Emanuel, Mayor Daley, now it's Mayor Lightfoot, that the Chicago mayor appoints the senior leadership and board members or board members to these separate agencies, right? So in total, from a public units of government standpoint, we have $24 billion that's being allocated now to supposedly take care of all of our public service needs across the city of Chicago. Public housing, to public education, to transportation, transit, right? To special services, to education, city colleges, and to our parks, all the beautiful parks that we have in the city, the open public space, right? Jackson Park, there's parks all over the city, right? And all of that is funneled through the mayor's office, meaning that the mayor of Chicago appoints the leadership to each of these entities, right? And so imagine then, from a political standpoint, after you just went through the context of Chicago 101, can you imagine now, right? Think about that. This one person at the top of the apex, at the top of the triangle chart right here at the top, controls all that influence, has all that direct influence over these budgets. That's jobs, contracts, hundreds and thousands of jobs and contracts flow through that leadership structure. That's why the battle for the mayor's office is always contentious. And this last one was huge. Andre Garcia I was senior director for Chuy Garcia camp, got him to the February runoff, the first time in history. Gets the Mayor Emanuel, and then this most recent one with Mayor Lightfoot was a huge battle around that political office. Okay, is that better, Wyatt? Make sense now? Now, what Tom was talking about was the extra money. There's $5 billion that is not being collected, that could be collected per year, right? And since we wrote the book, if the policy said, "Oh my God, we love this idea," if they went and were actually to put policy and then put that policy into practice, we could be now collecting at least 3 or 4 years of an additional $5 billion plus from those new ways of collecting funds from the bank, cutting down on police corruption, right? Getting rid of TIFs. You could generate more public resources that could go to exactly where we're struggling. So when the mayor says we don't have enough money to support PPE, please donate your PPE equipment. If the city says we don't have enough money to feed people, please donate. All these things, it's kind of hard to see that and say, well, you have billions and billions and billions of dollars. How are you spending the money, our taxpayer money, right? And that's the ultimate social justice battle, right? We can say no to police, we can say all these things, but at the end of the day, all these things that we're fighting for or against is funded. There's a budget behind it. And so when you go to say, show me the money and how it's being spent, that's when you face the most resistance by the system. Yes, Dana.
I just
Dana,
have a
sorry.
question, if you don't mind.
Jump in.
So when it comes to taxes, what can companies and corporations, businesses, what can they write off on their taxes?
You're unmute yourself, buddy.
Oh, sorry. So when it comes to taxes,
Not you, Dana. I'm sorry. Not you, buddy. I'm sorry. I'm talking to Tom. Unmute yourself, Tom. Stressor.
Yeah, so that's a separate conversation that we could get into. Depending on what kind of business you're in, you could get a write-offs for, if sometimes if you give people CTA passes, you can write it off. If you're in a historical building and you renovate it, you can get tax write-offs. So we have a separate analysis that we can talk about what is the reason for giving businesses tax write-offs. I'm not in favor of them, but it really doesn't show up in this conversation so much as we're talking about civic revenues. It's part of a larger picture because the city does do a bit of tax forgiveness and allows, especially some businesses are going to create a new company somewhere or build something on top of getting the TIF money, which is cash. They can also get a forgiveness of taxes. So instead of paying this much in property taxes, they pay this much. So it is actually part of the larger picture, but not as much that we would cover here. What about people thinking about this, the larger issues of justice and equity? This whole idea that Wyatt was hinting at is what is a city for?
Go ahead, Eli.
This is kind of going back to the budget that we were looking at. I noticed that we received $470 million as a COVID relief fund to the city. And of that, only $67 million went to housing assistance, small business assistance, workforce development, and broadband access to CPS. So it seems like a very small portion. I mean, myself, I'm a small business owner, and I know that I've been struggling through this, and it's kind of ridiculous to see the lack of assistance for small businesses. And I'm assuming also that since a small business is, I think, anything smaller than 500 employees, if I'm right on that, and I'm sure that a lot more funding went to those larger small businesses than, people like me who only have one or two employees.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, Eli. You're on the money.
You put your finger on a major issue. Again, who controls civic money is a huge issue for us. So,
right. So who made those decisions?
This is a new pot of money That wasn't available before. So the city, if we could x-ray the city's details, we would see that part of the revenue they enjoy are federal grants. So the city is successfully applying for and receiving federal grants for all sorts of things. This is a new one. Wasn't there before. So yay for the federal government making this money available for us. But then you raise this question, why did she use this money the way she did? It didn't help the people. It's a great question. And maybe we'll try to get an answer from her. I don't know. Maybe as a class, we'll write a letter to Mayor Lightfoot. Hold on to that thought, Eli.
Absolutely. I agree. Thank you for bringing that up. It's, yes, there's some things that are not sitting sound with the current structure and the way money is being distributed for neighborhoods, most impacted neighborhoods. You know, we know almost 70% of current cases are African-American and Latino people. In terms of COVID-19, why weren't those funds used? So that's a great question. That's the whole point of this discussion. Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions, thoughts, comments? Does it sit well? Go ahead. Remington.
You know, does the city work for? My immediate thought went to, I guess, those with sort of influence in the city probably also have financial resources at their disposal. There's lobbyists they may have at their disposal, and lobbyists, you know, for whatever reason, there are some who represent lower SES communities, but there's also lobbyists. If you want to be lucrative in that profession, they need to have a lucrative boss. So I would imagine that tilts the resources towards the wealthy more than it does for those who are not actively engaged, who do not just simply don't know or don't have active lobbyists working on their behalf.
Great point. A very famous organizer named of Saul Alinsky said, there are two kinds of power. One is organized money, and the other is organized people. How do you think that quote relates to what you just said, your observation?
Well, for some organized money, some people are sort of born into that. There's people that if you have cash, that's power right there. It's harder work, I would say, to organize people, you know, because we're all, as citizens, we all, you know, work our 9-to-5 jobs. We all have our personal problems. We're trying to put food on the table for our kids, get our kids educated, whatever. And then to add on top of all those sort of tasks and sort of unite as a people when we're so, I would say, so divided, so many different stratas right now. That's hard work. That's hard to do.
Well, you kind of summarized my whole career in your, you know, basically what Jonathan and I have spent our adult lives.
Hey, speak for yourself. I am, you know, I do more than just social justice work. I watch a lot of TV. I hang out at the beaches.
And raising a family, by the way.
And raising a family. That's social justice work. Absolutely.
Yeah, but seriously, Remington, I mean, the analysis contained in your observation is a critical one, because if you already have power, if you're already an affluent person, if you're already somebody who is already going to be in that upper class of lobbyists and lawyers, people that have privilege and are likely to contain privilege, things are going to look pretty good for you, and you're going to want to protect that strata, that position, the way things are, you know. So you're a young lawyer and you go to work for one of the large law firms called Winston & Strawn. It's called Mother Winston in Chicago because it has all the most powerful lawyers. Like the guy that used to be the attorney general would go and rotate to be a senior partner. Every city has that kind of strata of very powerful lawyers, financiers, and they all know each other. They used to be all white guys. And now, frankly, it's a little less white and a little less male, but it's mostly that. And those people that run the city are know each other, and they convene and commune with each other. Now, all the other folks that you talked about, Ussens, who are just folks, yeah, it's hard for us to organize, to meet each other, to work together in some kind of consistent way to make a policy happen. It's very, very hard work, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why you all are in this class and you're all pursuing the work that you're pursuing.
And, you know, and again, also, this ties back, you could tether this conversation to Bobby Harrell's psychosocialization, right? I mean, you know, we're all born into a world where the mechanics of oppression are in place. So if you're born into a culture and into a community of wealth, what's the most likely outcome? So, you know, this is all the reason why you're here. So just always think about those frameworks.
Yeah, it's a
Thank you.
great, we could circle back to that comment over and over again. So maybe the thing to be mindful about, class, is that when can you be aware of your own position in that cycle and that place of privilege? Sometimes we're up at the top and we're like getting the benefits of that privilege, but then sometimes we're down at the bottom, scraping and scrapping and trying to organize for justice, trying to bring people together, trying to do this hard work. And that's just great to be mindful of. That's awesome thought.
Go ahead, Celia.
Well, I'm a bit fired up after seeing that Colorado City mayor say that. It's just disgusts me that some individuals that are closer to the top of the pyramid can look down on their citizens and say, get off your ass and do something about it. It's like, well, what? It's so frustrating because you don't know other people's circumstances. It's mind-blowing to me that people can be so selfish and so self-centered, and it's just a lot to process.
It is, but we raise it to for your consideration to this question about what is the city for. So in the case of Mayor Tim, I guess he would say a city is really to give me a good job. You know, I'm the mayor, I draw a salary, and it's really not for much else. And I would say Governor Abbott of Texas might have the same view of the state of Texas, or President Bush President Trump had the same view of the country. It's kind of like on you guys, you know, the states or the cities. You figure out COVID. We got nothing to do with it. So it's a very serious question, and you know, obviously, from our point of view, is we think the government has a role to play, you know, in taking care of people, right? Obviously, that's where we come down on. But any other thoughts about that? What is a city for? Reaction to the mayor.
So the first thing that comes to mind when you say what is the city for, and especially with that mayor, is like John Locke's philosophy on government, where the government should be working for the people, and if it's not, then the people then have the right to replace that government or change it in some way. And so that's really what comes to mind for me.
Got it.
That kind of philosophy.
Right, and so there is also a philosophy that says that government is best which governs least. And so there is a political theory and a political strain which many people hold to, that like, I don't want a big government. I don't want a government telling me what to do, taking a lot of my taxes, and that is a very valid position. But you can see the problem. Now I'll tell you a story that will further, you know, maybe help us with the conversation. So a few years ago, there was a case of a man in Tennessee who moved out of the little town that he was in to an unincorporated part of the town, of the county. And that's where he chose to live. He wasn't paying taxes to the city. Now that city had a fire department, and they said, for those people who live outside the city limits, but still within the county of our area, if you want to be covered by our fire protection service, you must pay us $75 a year. And this gentleman chose not to pay that $75. So one day his house caught on fire. His neighbor's house also was on fire, but that neighbor paid the $75. So the fire department comes out on the call, puts out the fire of his neighbor, but doesn't put out his fire. Now, the guy rushes up to the fireman and says, but my house is on fire. And they said, well, we can't take care of you. What do you think about that case?
Wow. He wouldn't pay the $75 fee on top of his taxes?
He moved out of the city, so he didn't have to pay city taxes. And people who had that situation were given the option by the fire department to pay $75 a year
Got
to
it.
cover it. Because if you lived in the city, you're already paying taxes, so you didn't have to. But this is for people
Right.
who lived
He
within.
was living in an unincorporated area.
That's right. And he chose not to pay the $75. Should the fire department have put his fire out? I want to know from everyone. Eli, should they?
That's a good. Very.
I'm kind of conflicted. I'm still thinking about, I don't really know yet. I need to hear other
Alright.
people's opinions.
You're conflicted. CC, should he put the fire out?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay. Emily?
I'm thinking no.
No. Okay, good. Maybe we'll have a little debate, yays versus nays. Remington,
I'm there with Eli. I'm conflicted. If I was a firefighter, I would want to. But if I wanted to be, harsh, be like, hey man, you moved out. You talk about freedom. You want your freedom. You want less taxes. This also comes with less services. So.
right. Harsh case. Excellent. Wyatt, yes or no?
I'm in between as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lucas?
I'm also conflicted.
Interesting.
Dana?
Wow.
Dana?
Oh, it's your house.
Definitely in between as well.
Okay. Tom Fagan?
I would say I'm also conflicted.
Wow,
All right,
look
let
at you all on the fence.
All right, on the fence. So let me give you some more
What about you,
facts.
Tom? What do you think, Tom?
Oh, no, I'm not going to say my piece. I want to hear from the students, but let me give you some more facts that might push you one way or another. The man had pets in his house and they died in the fire. Does that move you one way or another? Also, the man who paid the $75, his house was successfully, they saved his house. And so the question would be, can you opt out, take his case and make it a little more exaggerated? Like, I don't use public transportation, I walk, so I shouldn't have to pay that part of my property taxes that is used by the CTA. Or I don't have a child, I don't choose to pay my part of the property taxes that go to public education. So considering those arguments, anyone change their mind? Yes, in one way or another.
Well,
Yes,
that
no, maybe.
sorry. I didn't mean to.
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Cece. Go ahead, Cece.
I was just going to say that was my original thought. What if there were kids in the house? What if there were pets in the house? That was my original thought. I guess it is I can see why people are saying no. But in my head, I guess for me, it comes down to we're all human and we're supposed to help each other out. But at the same token, if they're not paying the taxes to pay the firefighters.
Well, right. I mean, because to your point, CC, if everyone did that, the fire department would have no budget. So you couldn't maintain it. Eli, you were going to say something?
I think it would depend on whether or not they didn't pay because they couldn't afford it or because they didn't want to.
In this case, he had the money. He chose not to pay.
Okay, then I think that was his own decision.
So he should live with it.
I think so.
Okay, so you moved into Remington's camp. Anybody else want to change or amend their position?
I think if there's animals involved, then probably, just save the animals. Because if you don't, then come on, that's pretty morally damning. Like, who could just, if you had the ability to save an animal from burning alive and you didn't, then you got to reevaluate your values, in my opinion. Like, life has intrinsic value. Money is one thing. Like, money is only going to get you so far, but like actual human life is a different story. Human or animal life really is just kind of a different story for me. But it's just like that guy. He's not cool for doing that, but he's not.
You
But
moved
the
to the camp to
firefighters.
say yes.
Yeah. So So Remington, give Wyatt the counter argument, if you would.
I was kind of changing my mind. You want me to argue for not doing it?
Yes.
Okay. For not doing it, I would just say, you know, he's an American. You know, I'm thinking about, I'm putting on a fiscally conservative hat. We don't like taxes in the United States. Our founding fathers, we were kind of like, you know, the tea tax and King George III getting rid of all that. This is in our American DNA. We don't like taxes. So if he wants the choice as an American not to pay the taxes, he has to live with the consequences. And the firemen are sort of, you know, exempt from providing those services because he's not paying for them. It's like you're a business owner. If you want to be a business owner and take a risk, you know, it's just that's the American way, you know.
Got it. Anybody want to refute Remington's argument?
Well, it's kind of like the reason that we make people buy insurance for their cars, because like if you don't pay for the insurance, you could get someone else gets hurt and then you can't afford to pay for it.
There you go. So now we see a very key part of what we're trying to talk about here. Are you in this for yourself? And it's just like me, myself, and I, or are we part of the body politic? And even the man's decision to move from the city to wherever he wanted to move, well, no one stopped him. But he's severing himself from the body politic by saying, I don't have to pay, I don't want to pay. But he still wants the services that come from being a collective. A fire department isn't like the Tom Tresser Fire Department, like it's my business, like it's the Tresser families always run a fire department. That makes no sense. A fire department can only happen when it's endowed by the body politic. And that means all of us are paying into it. So I would be very scary if all of a sudden Chicago said, you know what, to save money, we're getting rid of the fire department. Hey, we're going to save $100 million a year. So everyone don't start any fires, you know, so we'll all save $100 million collectively, you know, so that would be like maybe $30 for me on my tax bill. Good for me. But collectively, what happens if the guy next door sets a fire? No. So we hope to persuade you that this idea of being in a body politic or a city comes with some responsibility. And if you want to live in a certain place, you enjoy all the excellent things of that place, but you got to pay the bill. There's no other way around it, unless you move to, I don't know, the moon or something. All right. I'm sorry.
Well,
John.
I mean, also, this is, I mean, also, we don't exist in a vacuum, right? In Chicago, right? So really, the road leads towards this notion of basic human dignity and human rights, right? And so the challenge is shifting our facts. So I'm going to post a video. You saw that for the Adler video. I'm going to put it up in your reading. Professor Kimberly Crenshaw did this TED Talk in 2016 around this issue of gender bias in terms of who's getting reported between Black males and Black females. She did an incredible discussion about intersectionality, right? And we just have to challenge our own frameworks constantly of how we look and perceive things around us, right? And so I think that's part of being a social justice practitioner, is not just coming up with the right answer. This is not a test. This is, oh, I'm a great champion. It's doing the individual personal hard work to consistently challenge yourself in terms of these perspectives and these frameworks. That's the journey itself is really what is required here, not just the outcome of getting my degree and getting placed in a job. I'm working for CPS, and now I'm a counselor. But the journey itself is really heightened and sharpened when you're really trying to become an effective social justice practitioner in a protracted way. I want you to really hold on to that, right? So next session, any last things? Any last comments?
I just have a quick question, and this, I don't know, but so let's say, you know, the analogy, the guy's house, the neighbor's house is on fire, and then the other guy's house catches on fire, but he didn't pay the $75 tax. So the firefighters get there. How do they know that he didn't pay the tax.
They have a list, they have a roster.
They know.
So they just check the roster on when they're on the route. I mean, even when the call comes in, they know what the address.
Oh my goodness, I
So
didn't know.
Yeah, so they wouldn't have actually gotten out of the firehouse if the call comes in from a house that wasn't on the list. They just wouldn't have answered the call.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, they just can't. I mean, and the fact that there were 2 pets in the house, well, why did he leave the pets in the house?
Right.
I mean, he ran out of the house.
It's on him.
You know, I mean, so, and this was actually a big deal in the media. And it was just like we're debating it now. The media was debating. So there were right-wing or conservative pundits who were debating, and there were the sort of more liberal pundits, and they were debating. And it wasn't as you might think it is. Some people on either side of the political spectrum had the opposite of what you might think there were. So there was a lot of debate in America. It was just like about 5 or 6 years ago. But I asked this question in all my classes, and we had the same kind of conversation as we just did. There's mixed feelings. There's good discussion.
Cool. So check out next week. Going to be TIF 101. Are there any work assignments for them, or should we just let them
Just read the book. Read that
read
chapter.
the book?
That's
And
plenty.
then you got the link. Save your chat because Tom put the link into the online access for the book. If you haven't gotten the book yet, and we'll be just exploring. We'll be illuminating TIF 101 next Saturday. Also, I'm gonna make sure I upload now. You know what you could do? Watch Crimshaw's 19-minute TED Talk on intersectionality. That'd be kind of cool. I know some of the Adler students have already done that, but I think it's definitely something. It's a quick video, and it's great. It's some great knowledge. It can expand your understanding of this work, and so I'll put that into the reading assignment. Okay, and this is a quote by her from that assignment. It's not verbatim, but as close as I can get. She is an incredible author and trainer, Kimberly Crenshaw. Look her up yourself.
And we're asking everyone to hold the date of April 10th as part of your commitment to this program. That is going to be our Civic Harambe, or all hands gathering of all the Civic Labs friends and family. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next week or two. But essentially, it'll be 2 hours of sharing, communing, mutual learning, mutual aid, maybe some music. So it'll be a fun event. We hope that you'll all be able to join us on April 10th. The link is in chat for registration. There's no charge.
All right, let's do a checkout. See where people are at now. Eli?
What is it?
Want to do a check? We're just gonna check out. Give you a chance to check out the space.
Oh, I haven't done this before.
Okay, so just check out. Where you at? How you doing? How you feeling?
I'm doing pretty good. I have a little bit to process from this conversation. So I'm sure that'll kind of be going through my mind, especially since it kind of, what we're talking about directly impacts me and my way of life. So, yeah.
Delia?
I'm a bit angry, fired up a bit. I was pretty calm this morning, but no, it's valuable information that I need to know. So thank you so much. It was a really good session. Thank you.
Okay. Lucas?
Yeah, this was definitely an enlightening session for myself as well. Really appreciate the way that y'all were breaking down the different topics and issues that we were able to discuss today, along with the budget of Chicago. That was just really intriguing for myself too, just to learn about that. So appreciate everything again.
Thank you. Wyatt?
Yeah, I agree. I think this was a really great session. I learned a lot. I'm really happy that I picked the Civic Lab to do my internship because I feel like the way that you guys plan to make a difference is probably the best because I feel like it can make the most overall difference. Where not to say that any of the other organizations were bad or anything like that, but I think I just really respect the going and looking at the finances behind it all, because I feel like that can make the actual most impact. So it's exciting.
Awesome. Thank you. Glad you're with us. Remington?
Yeah, I'll use Lucas's word. I think it was enlightening. That's what I first thought of. I think CC was talking about fire. I felt the fire rise within my belly a little bit during this discussion. I'm sure that makes me a big nerd, but this is the kind of the stuff that I'm passionate about, and I really enjoyed it.
Cool. Emily?
Yeah, I'm pretty fired up too. I'm excited to dive into this book a little more and continue learning. But I really appreciate all the information today. It's, yeah, enlightening.
Thank you. Dana?
Yeah, so a lot of information to process. Like I really appreciate the presentation and everything. And I definitely want to look at the budgets again more closely now that I have like more of the insight. And I'm definitely gonna start this book actually like right when we get off the Zoom. I'm excited to start that.
Well, thank you, Dana. Tom Fagan?
Yeah, I would say it was frustrating, but important information to know. I think being from Chicago, I have a lot of pride in the city, so it's just frustrating to know that there's so many problems with it. But hopefully through these efforts we can, make change.
Ashay, thank you for sharing that. I think that's huge. This is we do this because we love our city, we love our people here. This is out of my intention is to make the city better for the children and families. So absolutely, it's a tough one, always, every day. Thomas, check it out.
Well, thank you all for your patient ear. Jonathan and I, aside from doing social justice work, we consider ourselves educators and teachers and mentors, and there's a lot to get across. So you're all great, on point, giving us all your brains and your heart